everyone, and welcome back to P&P Kids. I'm so happy to see you today, and I'm happy that we are able to celebrate these most precious days of Pascha together. Christ is risen. Truly he is risen. Amen. So today we have a wonderful book. It kind of starts back with Lent, and you probably remember all our little journey with Lent and fasting and preparation for Holy Pascha. And so it kind of starts there, but it's called Pascha at the Duckpond. And I think you'll find a lot of things that you relate to and things we can learn from this story. It's written by Mother Melania, and we've read many of her books. And this is illustrated by a Presbytera friend of mine, Casey Halsell. And she's the wife of Father Simeon Halsell in Santa Barbara. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this book and the beautiful pictures in it. And so get settled and we'll sing a little song together, okay? How about we sing Christ is risen, okay? Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Sometimes I find out that if you wake up and you just don't feel right, if you just sing that, all those gloomy thoughts go away and you just are able to rejoice in the days of the resurrection. Okay, so Pascha at the Duckpond. Okay. It was Lent at the Duckpond, and Rigid Rooster was having a good Lent. At least he thought he was having a good Lent. He knew all the rules and he kept them, and he made sure everyone knew that he kept them. And he thought it was his job to make sure that everyone else kept them too. Capers the cat paid no attention to Lent. I have to drink milk every day, he would say. How else on earth can my beautiful orange coat keep its sheen? And I don't have time to make special meals for myself. Anyway, look at Rigid the rooster. If keeping Lent makes me like that, I'm much better off the way I am. One day, Rigid was going to visit Henry Hamster, who was sick with a bad cold. On his way, Rigid happened to see Capers the cat, drinking a bowl of milk. Capers, cried Rigid, shocked. It's Lent. You shouldn't be drinking milk. Capers didn't even bother answering him. He just kept drinking his milk. But he muttered to himself, I'm glad I'm not like that. Soon, Rigid arrived at Henry's house. Henry, said Rigid, I brought you a vaporizer. You know how easily hamsters get pneumonia. Thanks, Rigid, said Henry. That was kind of you. Rigid thought the same thing. He smiled back and said, I try to do extra good deeds during Lent. It's important, you know. Henry just smiled and thanked Rigid again, and then he asked him if he would like to stay a little while. No thanks, Henry, said Rigid. I have a long list of other good deeds I need to do, so I'll see you later. Okay, Henry smiled, and thanks again. Shortly after Rigid left, Charity the church mouse came by carrying a thermos of soup. Hi, Henry, Charity said. I thought this might help warm you up. Henry thanked her and asked her to sit down. Charity was never too busy to spend time with a friend, so she sat a while with Henry. Right away, she noticed that he didn't have a coat or a blanket. He was too poor. The next day, the mailman arrived at the door with a warm new coat and a woolen blanket. There was no note and no name on the package, but Henry was pretty sure who sent them. As he put them on, he thought of Charity's threadbare coat. God bless Charity, he said, with tears in his eyes. Lent continued. Rigid kept following all the rules. He even did more than the rules said. He did more prostrations, ate less, and drank less than all the other animals. He got more and more tired, but he didn't stop. He wanted this to be his best Lent ever. Capers kept doing what he always did. He ate what he liked, and he did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. Henry was sick for the rest of Lent. His doctor told him he needed milk and oil and other foods to help make him well, and he was too sick to do much for anybody, but he was thankful. Charity visited Henry every day. She always brought him a thermos of soup, and whenever he needed something, it was always showed up on his doorstep. Charity didn't think she was doing a good deed, though. She admired Henry, and she was so grateful to have him for a friend, and she wanted him to be well. Finally, Pascha came. All the animals waited outside the church. Fearless, the fire duck, was ready to help any animals that set their house or hair on fire with candles. Polly, the parrot, was present. Charity and Henry were there too. Henry was still sick, but he was well enough now that Charity was able to bring him to church in a wheelchair. The whole Duckpond was there, all except for Capers and Rigid. Maybe you're not surprised that Capers wasn't there, but what about Rigid? Charity noticed that Capers and Rigid were missing, so she asked Fearless to stay with Henry, and got Polly to come with her. First, they went to Rigid's house. He had passed out from not eating or drinking enough. Polly took him to the hospital, where he had to stay for several days until he was better. While Polly took Rigid to the hospital, Charity went looking for Capers. He was sitting in his house looking a little lonesome. "Why don't you come to church, Capers?" asked Charity. Well, if anyone else had asked that, Capers would just have laughed, but he loved Charity. So he said, "Well, I don't really like going to church, but I will come because you asked me." Capers and Charity got back to the church just in time to see the people come out. All the animals followed the procession, carrying their candles. Charity couldn't hold one because she needed both hands to push Henry's wheelchair, and Henry was still too weak. But it didn't matter. Their faces were brighter than the candles. After the people went back into the church, the animals crowded around the windows so that they could hear what was happening. This is what they heard. "If anyone has labored from the first hour, let him today receive his just reward. If anyone has come at the third hour with thanksgiving, let him keep the feast. If anyone has arrived at the 6th hour, let him have no misgivings, for he shall suffer no loss. If anyone has delayed until the 9th hour, let him draw near without hesitation. If anyone has arrived even at the 11th hour, let him not fear on account of his delay." Capers brushed every tear away from his eyes. He looked at the bright faces of his friends. They were so bright that he couldn't look at them very long. He turned to Charity and said, "I don't deserve to be here, but thank you so much for inviting me." And then, though he didn't know it, his face also became bright as theirs. After church, Capers, Henry, and Charity went to see Rigid. Rigid had been thinking. "Hi, Rigid," Charity said. "I hope you're doing better. I'm sorry you missed Pascha. You've never missed it before." Rigid looked at the bright faces of Capers and Henry and Charity, and his eyes also teared up. "No, I think I've always missed Pascha," Rigid replied. "But maybe you can teach me how not to miss it next year." They all smiled. Rigid hadn't missed Pascha after all. And that's the end of the story. So what do you think they were teaching us? Well, I think they were that the story's teaching us that to prepare for Pascha isn't only the external things like not eating and not drinking and keeping the fast and telling others to do it or don't do it, but to remember that we're preparing our hearts for Pascha, where we're asking God to forgive us and make us pure and ready to receive the resurrection, the news of the resurrection. Okay. And for Casper didn't really care. He was kind of like, I don't care about fasting. I don't even care about going to church. But all of a sudden he realized that he wasn't worthy to be there, but he saw the radiance of his friends, and he was so happy that they had invited him. And then all of a sudden he received the joy of Pascha too, and his face became enlightened. Okay. And then Charity, she was doing all her good works that she always does, being kind and loving to everyone. And she didn't even think twice about what she was doing because she loved. And I think that's how we should all be. We shouldn't think like, okay, I've done one good deed today. I'm going to do one good deed tomorrow. I'm going to tell everybody I did all those good deeds, because then we lose our reward. We're just doing it because we love people. So we can learn from all of these. And especially today, we can keep the joy of the resurrection by visiting others, saying Christ is risen to everyone that we meet, and helping others maybe that you know in your own area that didn't get to make it for the Pascha feast. You can bring a little bit of the joy of Pascha to their homes, make them something or make them a card and bring it to them and say Christ is risen. And you can change the whole world around you, okay? I'm so happy to see you, my little brothers and sisters, today. And I hope that you carry the joy of Pascha everywhere you go this week. And we'll see you again on PNP Kids. Thanks for being with us. Christ is risen.
Patristic Nectar Publications is pleased to present Enduring Love, Laying Christian Foundations for Marriage. Marriage preparation, together with the sacred institution itself, has fallen on hard times in the post-Christian West. It is more important than ever for couples to saturate their hearts and minds with the glorious vision of holy matrimony presented by the Church in holy tradition and lived by countless saints. Here in these pages, couples will find inspired teaching from the Holy Scriptures, the writings of the Holy Fathers, and the service text of the sacrament itself on how to live in a genuinely Christian marriage in which the home becomes a domestic church. Through enduring love, may God inspire the hearts of those preparing to be married and also those already married who would like to deepen their union and render it more pleasing to God. Available now at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.